Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Black Lightning. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we learned some very interesting things because Gambi ends up discovering that basically on the outside, outside of Freeland, no one knows what's going down in Freeland. Like, the fact of the matter is, like, it's so interesting. They've been so, trying to spread their message across all of Freeland. Obviously, the resistance and everything, letting everyone know exactly what the ASA is up to. Because obviously, they were only able to get, the kind of the resistance messages out to certain areas. But now you kind of realize, like, there's so much more at play here because obviously the ASA is covering up everything that they're doing, which, I mean, it makes sense. They're kind of like because the whole point is to kind of, not let anyone know what's going on. Because that's why, Odell kills anyone that finds out the president's connection to all of this, is to kind of have that plausible deniability thing. And obviously, it's not going to look good, no matter what the circumstances is, all the stuff that the ASA is doing. That's why they're able to kind of do it with no repercussions, because everyone else thinks it's like some kind of almost like a viral outbreak. The reason why, no one's even come there to try and check on them, because it's like, well, obviously no one wants to get sick. So that's a whole interesting element in itself. Which that element of the episode led a very interesting route where we had Gambi trying to get the Resistance's message out, that Jamila kind of put together, all the things, not just what happened to Jefferson, but just everything the ASA is doing, locking people up, kind of, putting them in cages type of situation. In the process, he ends up meeting a metahuman who is one of the pod kids. His name is Baron, but he goes to by TC because he's a tech. What was the word exactly? I forgot what the term was that they used, but basically he, with his mind, he can communicate with technology, which is actually even more heartbreaking when you look at his situation, having been in the pods for 30 years and coming out, and then it's like, oh yeah, being overwhelmed by all the all the smartphones and stuff like that. It becomes a little overwhelming for his power. So he came to this particular radio tower because obviously the machines there aren't as new and as sophisticated, so they're not as overwhelming. Because I think it's because for him it's very befitting because they're kind of machines of a forgotten era, and he's kind of in a he's a kid out of time essentially. So there was almost similarity. So I think that's why he finds comfort amongst those machines in particular. So I thought that was kind of an interesting element. And he brought up a whole point of oh yeah, the fact of the matter is you're ASA and stuff like that, which obviously Gambi was like, no, if I was with the ASA, which I'm like, it's funny because at one point in time you did work for the ASA, but working with TC, they were able to luckily get their message out there before the ASA was able to track them down and everything. Because I think for one thing, Gambi didn't want to take them to that particular spot because he knew that's where TC was hiding out. And I think, well, he didn't want the ASA to know exactly what they were doing and where they were doing out from. But I think it's more so because this is kind of the only place TC felt at home and okay. And I think he didn't want to take that away from him. So. But when it was all said and done, Gambi didn't look into his files, and it's oh, I was the one. Because I thought it was kind of interesting, because he's oh, I know you because, I work with Dr. Lin. But part of me was wondering, is it more than that? I think for him, he probably did see him through working with Lin, but at the same time, it might have come about because of the whole... that Gambi was in fact the one who had kidnapped him originally, which makes me wonder, did Gambi just think he recognized them, wondering if it was that, or was he reading the file to clarify, or was it just because it's just a reminder of his shady past with the ASA? It's actually kind of interesting because that hasn't really come up in a while. The last time that really came up was season 1 when Jeff found out, when Gambi told him and everything about his ASA connection. That's the last time that's really come up. So I think, especially with this whole situation, is the perfect time to kind of bring that back. The fact is that Gambi does have to deal with his past. The fact is a lot of stuff he did back when he was working with the ASA because, in his mind, he thought it was for the greater good. But now you see kind of how warped the ASA is and how far they're willing to go. Obviously, Gambi disagreed with their way of doing things a long time ago, but it's just, your past, you can't run from it. It has a way to kind of come back to haunt you. So I think that's setting up a very interesting element of Gambi looking after TC, because it's I'm literally the one who basically took 30 years of your life away from you. So I'm wondering, is he going to tell TC about that? especially because well, at this point he's kind of gained TC's trust, but I'm curious to see what Gambi ends up doing in the long run with all of that, you know. So that's an interesting element. Another element to this episode is the whole Jennifer and Brandon situation. Obviously, kind of apologies kind of going all around because it's like, well, Brandon kind of kicked her out, which I'm like, you kind of had a right to. I mean, to be fair, at the time she didn't have any information on Jace. She was kind of pulling you along, but even she's kind of like, yeah, I'm just trying to understand how our powers work. And so it's the whole thing of like, well, you're lightning, I'm earth. The fact of the matter is maybe my powers kind of ground yours, because that hasn't really come up too much about her collabing her powers with other metas. That's never really been a thing. The only people she's ever collaborated with was her dad. It's like, well, their powers are similar yet very different at the same time. So that's almost like that's lightning and lightning coming together. But his situation, because he's earth, I guess because it also comes from the fact is that Jennifer has a hard time controlling her powers, because her powers can, you know, there almost seems to be no limit to Jennifer's powers. Like, obviously it takes a toll on her, obviously, but I think in combination with someone like, whereas it took Jeff kind of siphoning off her energy to kind of keep her cool last season, I think kind of that same aspect could be seen in Brandon, and even Jennifer testing, being like, oh, maybe you'll find out the fact is there is no limits to how much of my energy you can absorb. I could go full, I guess, like if she ever wants to kind of push her powers, she can always test it out on Brandon. But also I think if she ever got fully consumed by her powers, Brandon could probably help her in a way even her own dad couldn't. So that can be an element that they're potentially setting up. We do kind of, I thought was kind of interesting because Jennifer, you know, because Brandon asked us like, oh, so how did you become a metahuman? Which she was like, you know, some dude slipped me green light, which is like, I thought that was fascinating. I was like, right, you're not going to tell him that your dad is, I mean, not even just the whole thing of like, oh, your dad's a metahuman. Because I mean, obviously that would, well, because I was about to say she can't tell the truth because it'd be like, oh, you'd have to bring up the fact is that you're genetically a metahuman, which like there's only one other metahuman in Freeland that has similar powers, so 2 and 2 starts getting put together in that regard. So now it's just kind of looked at as like, she had green light, and maybe her family knows, or maybe she's keeping this a secret from them, whichever the case may be. But it is a thing of like, Anissa and Jennifer are a very rare breed, because to my knowledge, they still haven't established any other metas who were born because of their parent being a metahuman. That hasn't been a thing with anyone else, so obviously that's even more reason why they keep it secret. Also, I think that shows that she isn't still quite ready to kind of open up completely to Brandon. But it's interesting, obviously, other aspects to her life. It's something, you know, but we understand the reason why Brandon became the way he did is because of Jace's experiments on his mom. The fact is that it kind of slowly drove her insane until she died. But what I'm confused about is he said this whole thing of like, because of her, things changed. I was wondering what he's saying, like, oh, I gained powers because of Jace's experiments on my mom, or was it like I was already a meta in some way and maybe her experiment shifted? I think it was the former, not the latter, but it just, the way he phrased it made it seem like, oh, there were already metahuman abilities there, but her experiment shifted them, you know, whatever the case may be. And, you know, they're also very interesting, you know, because, Jennifer and, you know, Brendan are in very similar circumstances, because like obviously someone you care about was taken from you, and obviously you're dead set on revenge. You want to track down that person and kill them, which Jennifer can understand. After what happened to Khalil, she wanted to buy his dead, and even though she didn't kill him, there's still a part of her even right now still wanting to do that. So, you know, I thought that was kind of a neat element to kind of, you know, draw these two characters together like that. But obviously when he learns that Chase isn't even in Freeland anymore, which that immediately makes me think, okay, because I had this thought before of like, I think Jennifer's going to hook him up with like knowing where Jace is. And the fact is, I think Jennifer might get a little overboard and think like the moment she finds out where Jace is, it's like, you know what, let me go take care of this whole Markovian situation. So she might try to go in there with Brandon's help, or maybe she might even try to go do it alone because she thinks like, oh, I'm supercharged, I'm super powerful. I brought that up before of things going sideways, but this whole situation just immediately made me think of that, you know, because it's like at the very least she has some idea of where, she doesn't have an exact idea, but she's more likely in a position to be able to find out. So I'm curious to see whether that becomes like a full blown like full charge ahead vendetta situation, or maybe it won't be that. Maybe I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where that kind of goes. But then there's the other element to the whole situation where we see Brandon lose control, kind of bringing even more similarities between him and Jennifer. The fact is him kind of like getting sucked up into his powers, and because obviously, your powers are influenced by your emotions, which that even more fuels this interesting connection that they are both, obviously, they're these teenagers who, have a lot of, kind of like, you're a teenager where your emotions are kind of running wild, especially after everything that they've obviously been through in their respective lives and having meta-human abilities on top of that. It's an interesting combination all around that I'm curious to see what that dynamic and what that all really kind of becomes and is going forward with, whatever their story kind of turns into. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Another big aspect to this episode is Henderson coming to Jeff for help, because it turns out like their third grade teacher, I'm blanking on her name right now, but basically she lives in a place that the ASA is trying to get everyone out of, and they were able to get everyone else to leave except for her, because they're basically wanting to set that place up, I think, to be like a base of operations for them, especially for Williams, because obviously Jeff ended up taking out Major Gray last episode. She was one of the many ASA agents that got taken out last episode by him. So Williams is kind of in charge right now, and so it turns to this thing of because obviously Henderson and Jeff had their very different approaches to this whole, how they want to handle this whole thing, like to kind of be doing the hero thing and helping Freeland and everything. But obviously they come together on this particular goal and purpose. And obviously Jeff goes in to actually talk to her, but she doesn't want to go, because obviously for Jeff, it's like, the fact of the matter is, I'm asking you to leave because I don't want them to hurt you, because it's like, this is just a place. It doesn't matter that the only thing important is her safety and everything, because it's just almost kind of like, well, home is where the heart is and everything, which that even more so applies in this situation, because for her it's like, this place is her heart, because this is what this home meant to her. The fact is, they had a sit-in to make it so that colored people could live in that current building. And it's like, oh, you see that tree over there that used to climb all the time? That's where I shook Obama's hand, and met with Obama. And so it's like, for her, it's like, there's so much history tied into this. Like, a lot of those events in her life played a special role in her life. And that's what this home represents. It represents something that's hers and that's connected to her past. And it's like, you're asking me to give that up. And it's like, I get it. You're worried about me and everything. And I saw what happened to you. You chose not to fight, but she's like, this is my choice, and kind of, respect my choice. This is me taking a stand, because at the end of the day, it's like, all we can do is make our stand and hope, and pray that God has our back. And, I think for Jeff, it's like, seeing that, like, it's like, the fact is she's willing to stand up for what she believes in, and here I am, I have my own reasons for why I haven't fought back, why I haven't stood up, but it's like, the fact is that she's willing to do this. It's like, for her home, Freeland is my home too, so why aren't I willing to do the same thing? So Jeff suits up and starts knocking down any ASA agents nearby. Henderson kind of joins up with them. Gamby sent Anissa out as Thunder, that's got to be nice to kind of suit up for the first time in a long time. And I thought that's kind of pretty dope, them kind of working together. Then there's the moment Khalil showed up. I thought that'd be like a brawl between him, because obviously his main target was Black Lightning anyway. But I think, Anissa was there and kind of got in the way. And I thought that was a pretty dope fight and everything too. Especially like at one point where she's kind of twisting his arm and adding pressure, but he kind of turns his arm back, showing, it isn't that things aren't so one-sided when it comes to this. And so Khalil was able to kind of handle his own against Nissa. And I like this kind of being round too. It's like, yeah, you got me last time, but you killed Avon. So it's like, this time I got you, and she had the upper hand in the fight. But, for her, it gets revealed that like, whoa, that's Khalil. So obviously this episode, she hasn't brought it up to anyone. We know that Lynn and Gamby know, but Jeff and Jennifer don't know. And obviously Gamby and Lynn don't know that Anissa knows, and Anissa doesn't know that Gamby and Lynn knows, and no one knows. The fact is that Gamby's keeping this secret for Lynn because Lynn told him not to tell anybody, especially, or more so than anything, and don't tell Jennifer. So, but that was something they kind of agreed on. It's a whole thing. So I'm curious to see, what that reveal, the ripples from that reveal and everything. So, especially considering the fact is even Jennifer's still thinking about like, oh, I want to kill Tobias because he killed Khalil. And obviously, what I thought was kind of a neat element to this too was like even other people, some of the other agents there, the other, ASA agents were having reservations about this because even one of the dudes like, are you sure about this? The fact is, it's just one old lady who doesn't want to leave her home. And the other dude is like, orders are orders. So not everyone is okay with this whole thing, but it's just kind of like, and I think that's going to be an interesting thing going forward because it is going to be a thing of obviously the ASA having a divide, those who are just willing to follow orders and do whatever, and those who have their reservations about this whole situation. I think that's going to cause a shift in this whole thing, and it might actually kind of work out for the resistance and kind of turn the tide in their favor, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But what I thought was interesting is when we got Williams decided, like, you know what, I'm gonna take care of this once and for all myself, and him and Jeff go toe to toe because at first I was like, what was his ability again? And then his eyes started lighting up. I was like, right. You can copy other meta's abilities. So he tries to fight Jeff toe to toe, but it's like you're kind of a bit of an idiot because you don't realize like I had this suit that kind of makes it so that my powers don't act as a double-edged sword to me. You don't have that same liberty, so his body gives out way before Jeff's does, so kind of taking him out of commission, which begs the question, who the hell's taking over now? Because Odell's kind of out of commission, but I guess this is going to be an opportunity for Odell to circle back out. But obviously Williams has been taken care of, Gray's been taken care of, so it's like I'm wondering who else is going to take charge, but I'm leaning more towards like it's probably going to end up being Odell again, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But luckily, they were able to help her keep her home and showed Freeland that obviously the police and Black Lightning are in this together, or at the very least Henderson, and Black Lightning are in this together to make to protect Freeland. It's like we were able to protect this home, so now let's take back our city, so because for Jeff it's like this way of going about things is something I can get down for, like like not trying to go once again, not going down the violent route to get peace, but fight back in defense of something, standing up for something, fighting back. It's one thing, but kind of going out of your way to actively attack and hurt someone, like that's just a path he's not willing to, go down, so I think that's kind of an interesting setup and seeing him fully realized as part of the resistance now. So that's pretty dope. Then on top of all of this, we have to circle back to Lynn's situation where obviously she's meeting up with Tobias, which I even love Tobias, like he's kind of being put through the test and everything that the ASA does to everyone else of like, oh yeah, tell us your date of birth and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, I know what you're up to. But I forgot what was his exact wording, but it was so good. It was so villainous for him to be like, oh, the fact that basically being like, I forgot what he said. It was so good. I wish I could remember it. But like the lights in the room kind of turn red and he looks like super malicious. It was, it was very aesthetically nice. And then he has his conversations with Lynn, which obviously Lynn's just kind of like, I just want to use you to help them pod kids, which he's like, that when this is all said and done, the ASA is just going to turn them into weapons. But, it's like, I even love the whole thing of like, why does Black Lightning wear the suit that he does? It's like, is he a fan of Earth, Wind, and Fire or something like that? Cracking jokes. But Lynn's just like, I'm not naive. I know that they're going to try and do that. But the fact of the matter is, once I've cured the pod kids, the fact of the matter is, I think it's a thing of like, they will be able to make their own choices, which I even like this line from, Tobias being like, oh, is that what we're calling slavery in these PC days of ours or something? I was like, oh man, I thought that was so I thought that was such an interesting like point to kind of, it's almost like, oh, you're trying to fluff it up by being like, oh, they're going to have a choice, but being like, oh, there is no choice in the matter. because once again, I think Lynn is so misguided by her need to like save them that yeah, she thinks like, oh, like the fact of the matter is the kids will be okay in the end, but it's almost like you're willing to save them, and it's like beyond that, it's like you seem like you care, but the fact is you're willing to cure them, and it seems like you're not even really thinking about the consequences of that, like the position you're putting them in. Like Jeff kind of made valid points of like what this all means, but obviously in her mind it's like, oh, Jeff's just doing this because he has to be in charge. He has to be right. But I think it's, once again, I don't think it's Lynn is in the right state of mind. Like I said, it's just she's so desperate to save the kids because of so many that she lost last season. But now on top of all of that, like her being on green light definitely ain't making her think straight. Even though she thinks she's thinking, on so much of a higher level. But regardless, so it's like. And then he tells her, "Is like, you do realize that obviously their plan is to also, when this all happens, they're going to like flood the streets with green light." And she's like, "How would they even do that?" And he's like, "I don't know, but then like later on, she looks into one of their facilities and sees it like, oh, they have manufactured a crap ton of green lights. So everything Tobias said was real." Which there's a part of my brain that's like, you don't think he set that up like that, do you? That the fact of the matter is, well, he's got connections. He knows things he shouldn't know. So somebody is whispering or doing stuff for him. So not unless he's manipulating certain people in the ASA to do stuff for him to kind of set that situation up to make Lynn a little off balance. But it's like, oh, you want to stop the ASA, the best way to do that is to get rid of me, keep me from being here, because obviously if you have me, they'll be able to get the kids more in line, because this will all be connected to the curing the pod kids and everything. So, but obviously Lynn doesn't want to do that because it means letting someone like Tobias, a psychopath like him, out. So obviously she has super mega ultra reservations with that. So. But I thought it was kind of interesting, obviously, because of the whole Jeff joining with the resistance and everything. Gamby has to come help her escape, because for her it's like, and even Lynn getting pissed off, like, oh, Jeff, like, once again, the whole thing was like she felt like Jeff made so many moves without consulting her, which, to be fair, Jeff has been trying to talk to you, but you haven't been home in a while, so it's one of those things where you're so caught up in your own situation and you're kind of feeling like everyone's against you, more so than, so it's like she disagrees on Jeff, but I think there's a lot of stuff that she's just trying to, I think because of her own problems, she's kind of like deflecting a lot of that onto Jeff. Some, from one perspective, you can look at it as necessary, but a lot of it you can be like, oh, that's completely unnecessary. But regardless. And it's kind of interesting. She's like, oh no, I got to get the cure and everything. And it's like, no, she's up there stuffing her purse full of green light. It's like, man, that's sad to see her kind of like almost like in this, like basically a junky move, and it's like, holy crap, to see like, obviously we knew she was desperate, but like that is a major desperate thing, which once again, no one is aware of she's going through that. Then there's that one ASA guy that let her go. Like, what was that about? That was interesting. He just kind of gave her the nod and let her. I'm like, what the hell is that about? Not less that's kind of what I was referring to earlier. Not less that ends up being someone who's working for Tobias that kind of just let her go. I'm curious about that. But obviously when she's leaving with Gamby, she drops her purse that was filled with green light. And obviously it kind of pisses her off because she's like upset, it's like, no, I need my bag. Gamby's like, no, we gotta go. I'm like, wow, this is not going to be the best time. Because basically she's either going to go into town and score some green light of her own, or she's going to try and manufacture some again, or basically she's just probably just going to be a very different person right now, personality wise, just because she's going to be very on edge, because she's going to be going through major withdrawal. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see. Because she's not going to do regular green light. I mean, that's the thing. Like, everything is, a gateway. Like, obviously, she took a very stripped down version of the green light, but obviously, it's still just as addictive. It just doesn't have that meta-human potent element to it. But that's why I'm curious, like, will she be so desperate to get high that she's willing to even take green light, knowing that it could lead to her becoming a meta-human? I'm curious to see what that ends up, like, turning out. how that all ends up turning out. So some very interesting things. I'm curious to see, ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.